Oh, you know what? I can't hear you again.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay.
Alrighty. Great. Would you please introduce yourself and give a bit of your backstory, if you don't mind?
Sure. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I'm a clinical counselor, but I'm here to talk about my own experience as a mom who had post adoption depression with my second child. My first child is a bio kid.
Yes. Wow. Okay. And they're how far apart?
They're 7 years apart.
Okay. So what made you want to adopt the second time around?
Are you so, oh,
No, correct. You go ahead.
so we had our son, and then when he was about 4, we started trying for a second. I had a lot of reoccurrent miscarriage. And finally, we decided to turn to adoption. And his sister came home to our family when he was 7 years old, and she was 3 days old.
Wow. So you were in close contact with the birth mother then?
Yeah. So her birth mom's name is Jessica, and this was a private infant adoption. So we met, I think Jessica was around 7 months pregnant when we met and connected through an agency. And then she signed away her rights when Maddie, our daughter, was 72 hours old. That's the law in Ohio. And we took her home from the hospital.
Will you explain what was signing away her right? What exactly does that mean?
So she made an adoption plan and reached out to an agency. And the agency then presented her with profiles of hopeful adoptive parents. And she chose us, and then we connected at that time to talk about that and get to know each other with plans for it to be a fully open adoption. Now, every state has their own laws about when a woman is able to sign away her parental rights. And when that happens, she is no longer legally the parent of that child. In most states, the child is then actually under guardianship of the agency who then places it with the adoptive parents. And then, depending on the state, in our state, which was Ohio at the time, it would be 6 months before the adoption was finalized. And then they created a new birth certificate with my name as her. I know people don't know about this, with my name as her birth mother and my husband's as her birth father. And her original birth certificate was sealed. Now, we actually have a copy of that original birth certificate, but usually someone can't access that until they're 18 years old if the state allows them to do that. Not every state does.
Wow.
Yeah. And all of this contributed to my post-adoption depression because it's really an ugly process. It's really a terrible process.
It feels a bit draconian or
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
so you started to feel
Y
icky or sad or
All of it. So, before we hit record, you and I were talking about how important mothers are. And certainly,
oh,
as someone who had given birth, and I remember when they placed my son in my arms of going, "Oh, it's you." Like, "Oh, you're so familiar to me, this baby I hadn't met yet." Like, I just fell in love with him. And I knew that was something that had happened for Maddie's mom, Jessica. And knowing then what they lost in each other was really something difficult. It's still difficult to navigate, but at the time, I just felt devastated at participating in this incredible grief of because we were at the hospital and we took a baby from her mother. And even though there was this whole structure around it and this whole kind of belief system of adoption, it when we took Maddie home, that all fell apart and all I saw was the grief and the loss. And then trying to figure out how to mother Maddie through that. I was It was just a mess. And because you have worked so hard to bring this baby home and you're still being observed by the agency because they would visit once a month for the 6 months until the judge officially made us her parents. It was something I felt like I had to hide and not tell people. Yeah, it was very messy.
That's I've found that's common with every woman I've spoken to, among all of the topics that we all forget to hide everything. Yeah.
Which is why it's so important you're doing this podcast.
Yes,
Yes.
because the only way we can make each other feel like we're not something to be ashamed of, to tell our own story. So, do you think because you were a mother already, you had already had that experience? Do you think that's why you were so keen to adding to what you imagine happened in the beginning, Brad, even her first parent or her degree, or
I think possibly, but also I know because since then went back to school to become a therapist and I went through the postpartum support international training. And when they talk about the things that are more likely, the things that make us vulnerable to struggling after we become a parent, it's a lot of the difficulties and the challenges of becoming a parent. So if you've gone through infertility or have loss, you're more likely to get depressed afterwards. If you have a difficult relationship with your own mother, you're more likely to get depressed afterwards. There's all these things that now I look back and say, actually, I should have been on somebody's radar from the beginning. And having twins, having kids in the NICU, these are all things that make you more likely to have depression afterwards, having a difficult birth. So many of us were already vulnerable because it's a traumatic experience often coming to motherhood. And then having a baby does not cure that. Babies do not make your life easier. So then you're exhausted and you're trying to learn how in the world to parent this small person. And it's a wonder that any of us make it through. It's so hard. And there's not the social supports and there's not the actual supports. I think my husband stayed home for 2 weeks and many women now are listening going, no kidding. I hear your screams. Yeah.
oh, man. So there was a lot of time you were alone.
Yes. And Maddie had colic for the first 3 months. And so I assumed, oh, it's because she wants her real mother.
Oh,
And so I couldn't make her happy. We just walked her and bounced her for 3 months.
gosh. What are some of the other symptoms that you experienced?
What I remember mostly is just having this overwhelming guilt that not only had I taken this baby from her mother, but that I wasn't enjoying it. And I remember actually, and I've told Maddie is 20 now, and we've talked about this. So it's not like she would hear this and go, oh my, what? But so I had a friend who I was lucky that I already did have my mother friends because I was already parenting. And so
Mhm.
I did have women who stood up for me and were there for me. And one of them said to me, you can say anything you want to her if you say it in a sweet voice. So I would bounce her and say really sweetly, oh, honey, I think I've just ruined my life. I think everything is so hard now. And it just made me feel better to be able to express that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh my, that's
What is stuff?
funny. Wow, that's very funny.
And it
So
was and again, like, I had mother friends who remembered feeling that way.
that's great.
Yeah, so they just could forgive me before I was even ready to admit how I was feeling,
Yeah,
and that's just so important.
it's so important. Oh, wow. You mentioned that You talked to Maddie that she knows. So when did that happen? I find that very interesting.
Oh gosh, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. We have always been again, we had a fully open adoption, so she knows her whole story. She knows that I did struggle, and she knows why I struggled, and I think probably we shared that I probably shared that in the context of understanding that adoption for her is a mixed bag, 'cause she
Mm,
loves us. She loves me very much, but she has grief about what could have been, and she does have grief about the relationship that she might have had with Jessica that they don't have, of not being Jessica's parented daughter. And so
right.
probably it was in that kind of context of that we're allowed to have ambivalence, like to feel joy and grief and that it's all part of being a person.
That's such a that's such an important lesson to teach and to learn that you can feel two different or seemingly conflicting ways at the same time.
I tell a lot of moms, there's a whole genre of books of women who run away from home and from their family. And that's because we've all wanted to do that. Well, that's the fantasy is sometimes you wish you could just like I always tell people, sure, you probably love to run away and be a showgirl in Vegas and have a glamorous life. And who wouldn't want that sometimes? That's okay.
What? Certainly, it seems like men are more able to admit that than women are.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I totally think you're right. Because we're supposed to be such natural nurturers. But like you and I were talking before, mothering is, it's wonderful. What a gift, blah, blah, blah. It's also super boring. It's really, I can remember, and I was a preschool teacher. I was an early childhood educator. I love being with little kids. Like I loved it. And I wanted to gouge my eyes out from the boredom of being home with my own kids. Like both, yeah, it was so just like taking a walk on the sidewalk and they have to stop and look at every rock and you're just like, ugh, grinding your teeth with how bored you are. I just remember physically that heaviness of it.
Oh, wow. Like you can sensorily, you remember.
Totally.
um,
Yes. I remember that about my son too, of like I couldn't stop looking at him, but I was so tired of looking at him. Like I was so in love with him and I was nauseous from loving him so much.
Oh my gosh, that is so poetic. That's so beautifully poetic when you put it, but in a bizarre way. I love you so much that it makes me nauseous. Oh,
And nobody likes to be nauseous.
morning. But I think it makes complete sense because you're an adult human. You are an adult human person. And if you go a certain amount of not speaking to another adult human and like your reality doesn't seem like war. Like you went on and you put other wings for our adult with a college education or whatever. But now I just feel like I'm falling in now or making we're as anyone. You have to do the same with the job and like do it with like you.
Yeah, and we are not meant to raise children in isolation, and we are not meant to have these compartmentalized job. Like here, I'm a working person, and here I'm a mother. It's supposed to be all squished up. We're supposed to be in community, and I think that's part of what's crazy making too.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy making. That's a good new phrase. I think, and I can only speak from a woman's point of view. 'Cause I'm a woman. I just, I feel like that's particularly a thing for women. If you're the motherfucker who were, you're more unlike yourself. Like, do you work conditional? Do you work how? When do you work and what? How do you care for your child? And you have child care, and everyone has to know your number. And it's like, why? Why don't you care for a teacher?
I was excited. I thought COVID would change things because all of a sudden everybody's on Zoom and there were all those videos, remember, of kids interrupting
Yeah.
parents at work. And I loved it because I thought finally we're acknowledging that people have children and that
Yeah.
children matter and that children are not always convenient and that they get sick and that you have to feed them. And I was so hoping it would mean a shift culturally, and it hasn't. It's just so disappointing that we are all going back to pretending like parents aren't parents or
Yeah.
parents don't have jobs. And it was such an opportunity for us to grow as a society, and we didn't take the opportunity.
Yeah, it's like I had that same problem because I was actually taking care of my father at the time, and I've had to experience a real lack of, you know, flexibility, sort of passion at my um, and then not really flipped all of a sudden when COVID, everyone had to be accommodated. What it is part of entity.
Sort of ended. And actually, the school district that my practice was in, they made the teachers go and teach at school online. So all the
Right.
like every place else, the schools went online, the teachers were teaching via Zoom. And in my district, they decided that it was too distracting that they were parenting their own children while teaching. So they made them go to the school, go to the classroom and teach from the classroom without their children, never mind that there was no childcare.
So what
I have no idea what people did, but I just think I don't know how they did it. But it just devastated me that they would do that, and apparently it was because some parents in the district complained that their kids are being distracted, and I know we were all under tremendous stress, but it seems, gee, as a parent, you would get why that I don't
yeah.
know. And I don't think our kids are harmed by knowing that children exist in the world. Many of them are gonna be parents someday too. Yeah, yeah, that was discouraging.
Yeah. Earlier, we were talking about, before we started recording, we were talking about the moment when there is a crisis and that can lead to all the moment when you said it.
No, it's T. Barry Brazelton's Touchpoints theory.
There you go.
So he said it better.
Okay. So you, to paraphrase him badly, you said that a moment of crisis.
Yeah, so his theory is that there are these predictable moments that he calls touch points when parents are in some way making a decision as a parent that they step into their parenthood. So I think it happens I think it happens at the beginning when we're preparing for parenthood and we're decorating the nursery and
Mm.
thinking about the baby that will come home. But there's these specific times when we're making decisions about sleep or feeding or the toddlerhood when they start separating and we have to decide how to handle it, that those are all times that we are creating our parenthood. Like we make a
Mhm.
decision, we do a thing, we differentiate ourselves from other parents because we are parenting this child.
Mm.
Us, them, we shape each other.
Mm.
And that when we rely too much on experts to tell us what to do, we get in the way of that organic growth as parents. And it's one reason why I struggle when people are saying, this is how you parent, because there are a million and one ways to be a great parent. And I think parents are best served when somebody helps them discover their way for that child And you've got twins, which means you've got to discover 2 ways every time
Yeah.
because they're different. They're tiny people. There's different people,
They're
right?
so different. They are so different. So different.
Yeah. So whenever I see parenting a device that's like, talk like this and you'll get these results, I'm like, you might get those results. But I know from my 2 kids, I thought I had parenting nailed, and then Maddie came along and needed completely different parenting than her brother did. I had to relearn everything.
So did that were there touch point that happened early on while you were still in post-adoption depression?
Yeah, there were a couple, and the one thing I really remember, so she had colic, and we had to bounce her and walk her. We had to walk her constantly, and I don't actually even know if it was colic. All I know is she stopped crying once she got mobile, and she took her first steps at 8 months, and this kid was on fire. And so I think when she was 3 months old, she could push up on her knees and her hands, like almost like she could commando crawl already. She's crazy.
Wow.
And so there was a time we were walking around, I'm just pacing the yard, our backyard, just walking around with her in the sling. She liked to be outside. She liked to look at trees. And she was looking up at the trees and she stopped crying for a minute and she made like a gurgle noise. And I made a gurgle noise back at her. And it was the first that she looked at me with this surprise. Oh, you're here. Like she saw me. I'm not sure how old she was. It's in my journal. And I realized, oh, we're gonna be able to do this. Like we connected. And I can remember that time with her. So that was one time where we connected. And then the other thing was her mom, Jessica, wanted me to pierce her ears. And I said, I'm not gonna pierce her ears for her. I'm gonna let her choose for herself. And it was the first time that I chose something for Maddie. Like it was the first time I asserted my motherhood. And for me, it was one of those touch point times. And Jessica was incredibly gracious. We have a fine relationship because
Mhm.
that must not have been easy for her either. But it was the first time we negotiated that, what it was going to look like for me to parent.
Mhm.
And the thing I always say is that Jessica is her noun mother. Like she's just her mother. It's a fact. She gave birth
Right.
to her. She's her mother.
Right.
And I'm her verb mother.
Mm.
So I had to become her mother by mothering her. And that was really the first time I remember like stepping into that role in a really firm way.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's that makes so much sense.
And I think we all have to do that even when we give birth.
Yeah, and
We still have to verb mother.
yeah, I was just
Yeah.
that's what I was just thinking. Yeah, I absolutely can think of the first times where I had that feeling of verb mothering. I don't the word I did, and but totally, I and in totally really me, but he not.
I know it's powerful, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, especially either because there was such a handoff. Oh, really good emotional. If I go too far here, but since fade time and then there was a handoff, like such a enormous ceremony and handoff, which you also framed probably in the document. The narrative were Jen adopted with then they mean they should then come home. A child made wild just like my
Sure. Yeah.
it's hard to admit that because it's bad. Like I should I don't know. I know. For the monk and a gold bear. Yeah, I don't know how I did. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's unusual. I think we're just not allowed to talk about it
Yeah, we're not.
because we're supposed to just, I don't know, like it's just all supposed to be easy. And then when it's not easy for whatever reason, that somehow our fault when again, I think that we become parents and over again, we become parents.
Yeah, that I think in my short time, I have felt that. It's almost like I wake up every day and say to myself, okay, like here is your the mother. Wow.
Yes. Here I
Yeah, lodge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's not just I don't just roll out of bed and just like naturally flow through it.
And I think that is also another important thing. a- And again, I think Brazelton does this when he talks about these touch points, is we have to relearn it all the time because at every developmental stage, you have to learn new things. And I think when we look back, we start seeing our kids have a theme. Like I look back, they're both adults now, and I can look back and say, oh, there was always a theme to every struggle we had. Like it was always the same theme with them.
Wow.
And, but I couldn't see that at the time. So I would just hit a crisis where I'd go, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a terrible parent. I don't know how to parent this kid. And it was only after I think they were like 9 or 10 where I would go, oh wait, no, this is the same crisis. It's just in a new developmental space. Like we were talking about your son and that he's bright. And so there's going to be a particular kind of, he's probably going to be a loophole kid. You're probably going to be like, oh, here he is finding a new way to do a thing that I couldn't predict. That might be his theme with you. I don't know. You'll know
Lord.
when you can, you'll go, oh, that was him. This,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
When I'm working with parents and they're talking about, oh, this is the problem I'm having, I always ask them, what were they like when they were like 2-ish, 1.5 to 2.5? Because that's a time where there's usually some separation. And then 4 is another time. And I'll say, so what was your struggle with them at either of those times? Because probably there's going to be echoes of that here in this struggle. Like it's predictable that it might be hard at those ages. And once you know that, then you don't beat yourself up because it just
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so tell us what you do now.
So, besides my clinical practice, I have a program called Child Anxiety Support where I coach parents of anxious kids. And a lot of it is this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, so people come to me because they either have anxious kids or they're anxious about their kids and think it's their child's anxiety, but sometimes it's their anxiety. And the research says it doesn't really matter whose anxiety it is, just
Mm.
needs to be taken care of. And it is a lot of this because there's some predictable times where you'll see anxiety come up for kids and parents. It's like at around age 5, 4 and 5, 8, 9, 10, middle school. Like there are these predictable times when I expect to get calls from parents. And yeah, and I see them as touch points. I see them as those kinds of, how can we help you guys come back together again? How can we help you grow through this particular challenge?
Wow. My love to use your service in the many years to come.
Nah, you're going to do great. You're going to do great.
Thank you. But everyone needs.
Sure. But let's start with the assumption that because this is the truth. A lot of the parents I work with are doing great. They just need help to do more great. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Hmm. Yep.
It's not a bad place to be. Okay. It's been so much fun talking with you.
I've had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Sure. Yeah. Any old time.
Great. All right. Dawn, speak again.
Okay. Bye bye.
Okay.